We're in the first week in June, which is the start of our British summer, and this is the time when we are at the full swing of feeding the trees. Feeding the trees or fertilizing the trees. When you look at the bonsai in a nursery and see everything bright and green and in good health, that's a sign that the trees are in good condition and they are being fed. If you don't feed the trees regularly, they will go downhill, they will discolor, they get weak, and the trees will eventually wither and die. The reason why feeding is so important in bonsai, especially bonsai, is because this soil is so tiny. In that little tiny pot, the tree has to get all the nutrients it can. When you grow a tree in the ground or in a large flower pot, it can avail itself of all the nutrient that is either in the ground or in the large container. But with the large pots, it's not a problem. With bonsai, it is a particular problem. And the bigger and older the tree, the more important it is to keep it healthy. So let us look into our greenhouse and see the same thing applies to the indoor trees as well. So when you see all these very vigorous and strong trees growing, they are fed regularly to maintain them in good condition. All these trees have been pruned, so they've been kept in good condition and very tidy, lots of growth, but they will not stay like this forever. Those of you who've been doing bonsai a while will know that we have to feed our trees. So what does feeding the tree mean? In the same way that we feed ourselves to keep ourselves strong and healthy, trees need to be fed. And the food that they have is what we call fertilizer. So we sell lots of different fertilizers, mostly Japanese fertilizers because they're well trusted. We also sell the European types of fertilizer, which is liquid form, and some of them are in solid form as well. So there are all sorts of fertilizers and foods. So because we are a nursery, we buy them in 20 kilogram bags. If you look at it here, this is a typical bag that we would use, and a bag like this won't even cover our display area. 20 kilos soon gets used up. Now before I cut open the bag, let me explain to you. For instance, you see this 555, and this is a British brand, and this one has got 3.5, 7.5 and 10. So wherever you look, you will find that there is this mysterious formula. Look at this. This is the rapeseed fertilizer, which we break up and sell, and this is 541, and this is a typical Japanese fertilizer. And if I look closely, I should be able to find the formulation. This is 541, which is almost the same as some of the other ones. So they all have this triple number, and the triple number donates what we call the NPK. N, for those of you who know your chemistry, is nitrogen, P is phosphorus, and K is potassium. So these are the three key ingredients for any basic fertilizer. So N is the nitrogen, in this case it's 3.5, P phosphorus is 3.7, and K is 3.3. What do each of these elements do? Nitrogen, as you know, is the chemical that promotes leaf growth. It creates leaf growth and keeps the tree green. So if the N value is higher, it will create more green in the leaf. I know that in spring some people use a fertilizer which is high as 10 or even 12 nitrogen, but this one has got 3.5, which is a bit low. If you use chicken manure, which is also a very good fertilizer, that's got very, very high nitrogen, and that is used in very early spring. So that's got very high nitrogen. And P, phosphorus, and K, the potassium, are these elements that strengthen the tree. So when these numbers are high, they give good autumn color. If you grow tomato plants, the P and K is very high, the N is very low. So those are used for ripening the leaves. Some people in the UK have always tried to expound or promote the use of 0-10-10. Personally, I have never liked using 0-10-10 because it's got no nitrogen at all, and if you use it too much, the tree can become yellow, in fact. So don't go for something which has got zero nitrogen. I do not recommend it. But I think that if you want good autumn color, go for something which got higher P and K and lower nitrogen. So this is a very well balanced one. It's 3.5, 3.7, 3.3. Lots of the other ones have got different formulation. This, for instance, is 555. That is more balanced. And then most of these, like this one, is 555. You see? And this is 3.5, and that is 10. That's very high K, NPK. So this is good for strengthening the plant. So the higher the P and K, the more strength it gives to the plant in the autumn time. So I hope this hasn't confused you yet. Now, what is the difference between using liquid and solid feed? The liquid feed is easier to use. You just dilute this in water and water it into the plant, so it gets absorbed very easily. The pellets that we use are dissolvable, but it takes time to dissolve. So these ones, the small pellets, they would dissolve quicker. But if you use large pellets, we've got 3 different sizes of pellets, 4 different sizes. This is one size. This is another size, you see. And there are some which are even larger, that size. So it all depends on what you want to use. I don't think there's much of a difference. It's just that they will take more time to leach into the soil. Let us show you how we fertilize our own trees. Now, if I were to use the Japanese fertilizers, which is this, let me open this bag. So this one has got 555. If I were to use it for, say, a typical indoor bonsai, a tree of this size, I would probably put no more than, say, half a teaspoon, like so, half a teaspoon once every 2 months, and that would be sufficient for it. That would be sufficient. If you have a larger tree, maybe 1 teaspoon, or even if it's a very vigorous tree, you can use 1 leveled tablespoon like that. The trouble with using the natural rapeseed or fish meal fertilizer is that it gets very moldy, and if you use this in the house indoors, it can cause mold, and people don't like the look of mold. I don't know why people are afraid of these natural things. Mold is mold, it's not harmful. They use the liquid fertilizer, but I feel that the solid fertilizer is more potent and more effective than the liquid. So much said, it's all personal choice. And then we have these different contraptions for putting the fertilizer. You see, these are called fertilizer baskets. And when you get these pellets, like so, let me open one of these and show you. So the baskets are used so that it controls the release of the fertilizer. So in a basket like this, you can put 2 or 3 in. If a tree is growing very strong and healthy and you don't want to overfeed it, you just put a few pellets like that in here, close the basket, and then put it in there. So every time you water, the water leaches to that basket and then feeds the tree. So you can use it for the outdoor trees as well. Similarly, if you were to have the big pellets, the same thing would apply, except that if the pellet is large, it would take longer to get absorbed and leach into the soil. So one of those pellets would fit one of these baskets, and you would put it around the pot like this and put about 4 or 5 over there, and every time you water, the thing will leach through. What if you didn't use the baskets? If you didn't use the basket, it's perfectly okay, except that the birds are very greedy, and because it's got fish meal sometimes and the rapeseed, I think they find it tasty. The birds steal it, and because the birds steal it, you've lost the use of the fertilizer. So what we do instead I will show you. We have another method which I personally like to use. This bowl is my trusted bowl, and I put about a handful of pellets in there, and I fill it with water and I soak it till it becomes like a paste. You know the cereal that you get, like All Bran or all sorts of other types of cereal you have. You put it in there, it gets mushy, and then you can smear the paste over the surface, and then the birds are less likely to pinch that. So that is more effective because it goes straight into the soil. So that may be the preferred way to do it. But if you have fertilizer which comes like in a fine powder, that's not a problem. I vary my fertilizers, although more and more I'm inclined to use the Japanese fertilizers because they are very, very potent and powerful. Now this one, as I said, is a typical commercial tree fertilizer, and all it looks like is this. Look at it. It's like pure chalk. And what I would do, I would walk around the nursery. I don't take the trouble of measuring teaspoons and all because I'm so experienced in my judgment and my eye. I just go around and sprinkle it around. I even use my fingers like that and sprinkle the powder around, and that should last for at least a couple of months. So if you do that once every 2 months, that would be fine. So all these big trees, we walk around and put this fertilizer. This is the British fertilizer, which has got high P and K. So this, in case of the pyracantha, it would cause the flowers and the fruit, of course, to become very red, and the tree will get nice and strong. So I go around all the trees and look. I'll just show you what I would do. And I can sprinkle it direct, like so, just a little bit like that. That's enough. That's enough. That's all. I don't measure it with a teaspoon because from my experience I know roughly how much it needs. But don't, for goodness sake, pour the whole thing in. That would be too much, So again, a lot of it is what we call common sense. A lot of it is common sense. So that is all I really need to tell you about fertilizing your trees. But they have to be fed. If you don't feed it, your trees get weak. So this is all I need to say. So when do I start? With the evergreen conifers, which they continually grow. Even in the winter they grow slowly, but in our country we start feeding the conifers, the junipers and pines, from about March. We start feeding in March, especially the ones growing in the greenhouse, and we stop around maybe September time. With the deciduous trees, when they come into leaf in March, end of March, early April, I start feeding in May. So I've given it one feed, and then in the middle of June or this time I give another little feed, and then I stop, and then probably at the end of July, early August, I give another feed. So 3 times I feed the outdoor trees with the outdoor fertilizer. So that is the general regime of feeding the trees. But feed it you must, otherwise the trees get weak. And the same thing goes to the trees that are growing in flower pots in the field. We go around and just sprinkle handfuls of it. We don't measure with a teaspoon or what you call a dinner spoon. We just put handfuls of it in, but don't put too much. Talking of putting too much, there's a thing I have mentioned in other videos called reverse osmosis. Those of you who are scientifically minded will probably know what it is. I'm not a scientist, but I know what it does. If you put too much fertilizer, it causes the tree to act in the other way. It will throw the thing out, and it will stop the tree taking in moisture, so you can cause the tree to die. So reverse osmosis is dangerous. So if you put too much, it can be dangerous. As they say, too much of a good thing is not good. So you got to have a happy medium, happy balance. But feed you must. So I hope you benefited from this little theory and practical session of how you feed the trees. And you notice that we don't use the baskets ourselves because we have our different ways of doing it. For amateurs, I think the baskets are a very useful thing to do, and it controls it much more effectively. So that's how you would deal with the treatment of fertilizer. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and good luck.